So at first it was just, you know, just nights of random just crying, just like I just felt like really sad. I mean, it's hard to explain, you just feel really sad. And I remember it was always in like second person. I know my mom always used to tell me I was a miracle baby. She went to the specialist, and they told her she didn't have any genetic material in her eggs after she had me. And so it was like, I remember like looking in the mirror, and I'd just be like these thoughts would just keep coming into my head, like, you know, you're worthless, you're stupid, you're not going anywhere. God, like, if God ever made a mistake, he made a mistake with you. And I just remember all these thoughts. So a second person, like, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid. I'd be cussing at myself, and I didn't understand why I was doing this, but that's just kind of what was happening. And I began involving myself with alcohol, with partying, with drugs, bad relationships, and I was going downhill. And then I was going to a Christian school, and so they have like, I think they have a no tolerance policy with that kind of behavior. And so I got in trouble, and they sent me to drug and alcohol counseling. Huh. And that's when they found out that I had suicidal ideations, that I was depressed, and they called my parents. And so July came, and I was able to go to the depression recovery program.
Did an interview with a really cool, hip young guy, Johnny Stricker. Yeah. And we were out in the dark last night. I was asking him about his story. He's very, very interesting, very intellectual young guy. And he had a lot of interesting beliefs and things that were, in his view, fueling his depression. He came in here, and he was obviously putting his parents through living hell of wondering whether their sirens were going to go off, and it was for him, their son. What was your estimation when he came in here? Can you remember the scene? Can you remember how, his body language? Paint the picture for me.
Well, Johnny, in the first interview, I asked him, so Johnny, tell me about your goals in life. He says, I have no goals. So, with severely depressed people, they've kind of given up on life and they don't really have goals, and that's where he was. And I said, so what did your goals used to be until you thought you couldn't achieve them? And he says, well, I thought before I'd want to be a nurse, but he says, there's no way that I have the intellectual ability to go to nursing school and be persistent at that. And so he says, I've just kind of given up.
What do you think were the biggest game changers for him when it came to, because what was his diet before, and how does his diet change, and what effect do you think that had on him, his mind, his thinking?
I think the diet had a big impact.
What were the health principles you implemented?
So all the physical things gave me a clearer mind. So, I was eating, I don't know whoever's watching this, I was eating Wiener Schnitzel like all the time. And I worked at Taco Bell, so I was eating Taco Bell all the time. I was like, all I would eat was meat and sushi. And so when I came to Weimar, like, my diet was messed up. And I started eating their food, and I thought it was good, After I threw up the first couple of days because of like the exercise and, I don't know, maybe some withdrawals. I don't know if I was that hard. But I implemented the, vegan diet, plant-based, flaxseed. That was really important. Drink lots of water, eating lots of fruit.
And I think people profoundly underestimate the role that healthy nutrition can play in preventing and even healing conditions like depression and anxiety. I think and to not try diet, to go right to the drugs, which have side effects. And those side effects are harmful. Even the actual effects of the drugs are harmful because you are messing with the emotions. So, for example, a person on an antidepressant may get relief from their depression, but they get their emotions squashed. They're playing on just a flat level. So then they don't empathize as deeply with their friends and family. They lose the ability to feel sad when it's right to feel sad. We're meant to feel sad at some things and angry at some things and bored with some things. Those are actually signals sometimes that we need to get so we understand how we feel with life and people.
When we talk about diet and mental health, the best type of diet is going to be a whole food, plant-based diet. And the reason for that is because of the animal products and also sugars, refined carbs, that sort of thing can be very harmful for the body because it will increase inflammation in the brain. And one of the mediators for that, as far as the animal products are concerned, is arachidonic acid. So arachidonic acid increased in the body through these animal products will actually tend to tip the balance towards inflammation. And inflammation has been very clearly linked in recent years to mental health problems like depression, for example. Now, when we talk about sugar, one of the big things there is that it also can increase inflammation, and it can decrease BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And so what that means is that the ability for the brain to have neuroplasticity or change in a healthy way is actually minimized through sugar. And when we think about sugar, we usually just think about sweet stuff, but even refined carbs are a form of sugar. So white flour, for example, and the typical snacks that you eat on the shelf of the grocery store, those sorts of things are actually going to be processed by the body and lead to unhealthy effects both on the body and in the brain, and actually lead your brain to not function as well and not be able to have the neuroplasticity that you need to have optimal function.
Where do you see the correlation between fruits, vegetables, and other plant-based foods that increase happiness levels of people from what we're seeing, what maybe you've seen in your own life, your patients, studies, and other experiments that have been done?
Yeah. I mean, the amazing thing about diet, when we talk about an optimal diet, is as we try to eat as many of the fresh fruits and greens, they have so many amazing, what we call polyphenols in them, and there's thousands of polyphenols, and we've only scratched the surface to understanding what they all do for the body and the brain. But some of the most well-known ones, things like resveratrol, for example, omega-3 fatty acids, curcumin, these have been shown to have amazing effects on the brain. And so what we find is that if you just try to isolate some of these products from their original source, they often don't have the same effect. But if you eat the whole food and it has not just like the curcumin or not just the resveratrol, but it has the other factors that are supposed to go with it in the food, then it's going to have the most optimal effect on the body.
Nutrition is pretty straightforward, just low inflammatory. Stay away. If you're battling right now with anxiety, which also includes a direct connection with insomnia, you cannot be under the anxiety depression model and not suffer from insomnia or some sort of sleep disorder. They're all connected. You have to cut out dairy, you have to cut out grains, and you have to cut out meat. I mean, at this point, if this is where you're at, and if you want change, I challenge everyone, go on a plant-based diet for the next 1 week. Just see what it's like. I'm talking straight fruits and vegetables and nuts. And I challenge you, just experience it. See what it's like. And let your body tell you what you should be doing at the end of the day. Because you could slowly incorporate good, healthy grains back into your diet, but you're probably not going to want to eat meat much more. Besides maybe some good, high-quality fish, which has good, for the fish oil is great with the omegas for the brain. But beside that, you're really going to want to limit your meat for the rest of your life. I mean, that's such a burden on the body to digest meat. And it's very highly inflammatory. And when it comes to wheat, gluten, all that stuff, just be careful. Dairy is not good. At the end of the day, it's causing a lot of inflammation, a lot of mucus. And our battle here is against inflammation. So you'll find that your body will respond very good to this lifestyle. Consider it like a fast.
And for my brothers and sisters in Christ, or anyone else of any religion that fasts, take this as a fast. Take this as a spiritual endeavor. That's my little secret, is when I do something, it's not because I'm on a diet. It's because it's spiritual endeavor. So just try it out. Lots of water, limit your caffeine. Caffeine will really wreck you. I mean, coffee especially, cut off coffee. If you need a little caffeine boost, get some matcha green tea, get some green tea or whatever it is that you like, and other than coffee, because that'll cause a lot of anxiousness, and that could also mess with the neurotransmitters and serotonin. You don't want to get the jitters. So just some little quick tips. But again, try it for a week. Just anyone can do this for a week. Seriously, salads, fruits and vegetables for a week, some nuts. Tell me how you feel. You feel better, guarantee it.
So what we want to do is, first and foremost, we need to change our foods. We can use food to heal us, and we can also eat foods that will literally kill us and make us sick. And then I like to have a third category of foods that I call neutral. And so whenever we're sick, we need to eat the healing foods. So if we're going to talk about healing foods, that's where we go into plant-based diets. So we eliminate gluten, dairy, sugars, meats, and we stick to organic, or the best that we can do with our vegetables, our fruits, and doing healthy non-glutinous grains that we can add in there as well. And a lot of people will say, I don't know, then what am I supposed to eat? If I can't eat those things, then there's nothing left for me to eat. That's absolutely not true. There are amazing cookbooks out there. You can go even to YouTube and you can find amazing recipes. So the first thing is to get rid of everything that you have in your house, throw away all the junk, don't finish it because you feel like you got to finish your food. It's probably killing you. It's making you sick. So throw it away and go to the store and buy all vegetables, fruits, everything from the outside of the grocery store minus meats and dairies.
In 2 sentences, depression and anxiety, do you believe a plant-based diet is one of the solutions?
I do believe that a plant-based diet is one of the solutions, but I don't use the term plant-based diet because there's all spectrums of plant-based, and some could be unhealthy and some could be not healthy. We don't know what they're eating. They could be eating all, potatoes and rice. And
so nutritarian?
Right. A nutritarian diet focuses on the bioflavonoids and the antioxidants that fuel brain function, and it pays attention to essential fatty acids as well.
Will that help with depression and anxiety?
Absolutely. So the triad of features of our program for depression and anxiety is, number one, it's a diet with a high nutrient density, delivering bioflavonoids and antioxidants to the brain. Number two, we give protective fatty acids, making sure the person has enough EPA, because EPA can help people get it better from diet, and we use vegan EPA to do that. Number three, we give them morning light exposure, because we want to reset their melatonin serotonin axis. We expose them to like a light box or outdoor lighting first thing in the morning. We want to get their cycles. Number four, we give them exercise regularly, right? If we try to get them moving as well. So we're doing all these things. And number five, we don't want them snacking or eating between meals. We want them eating 3 meals a day on the same time each day to get their hormones at times right. Because a lot of times people are going all over the place with hormones at different times. We want to get the body on a nice biological clock between the melatonin and serotonin axis. This is basic information that everybody has a right to know. It should be taught in grade school. You shouldn't be able to graduate high school without knowing that you don't have to get sick, you don't have to get cancer, you don't have to get heart attacks and strokes, you don't have to get demented. Nutritional science has made incredible advances in the last 20 years, and with the right information that comes from the scientific literature, we could teach people this in school systems so people know they can protect themselves. And you know what? Just one more thing, is that the right foods protect your intelligence, protect your creativity, and protect you from becoming depressed. So you can't succeed in life. You can't essentially realize the American dream and be the full you that you can be unless you eat healthfully.
It takes essentially to be on a whole foods plant-based diet strictly, also to do an hour a day of meditation and other stress management techniques, to walk for half an hour a day, and to have love and support in your life by doing the support groups and also then taking those lessons into your everyday life. Now, sometimes it's actually easier to make big changes than small changes, even though that's counterintuitive, because when you make big changes, you feel so much better so quickly. It reframes the reason for making those changes from fear of dying to joy of living, because your brain gets more blood, you think more clearly, you have more energy, you need less sleep, you can actually grow so many new brain neurons through a process called neurogenesis. Your brain can actually get bigger in just a few weeks. Your skin gets more blood, you don't age as quickly. I mean, I'm 96, I look pretty good. No, just kidding. Yeah. Your heart gets more blood, your sexual organs get more blood in the same way that Viagra works. And so everything gets better in that way. But if you're otherwise just healthy and you want to lose a few pounds, or see if you can get off some blood pressure medicines or those kinds of things, one of the interesting findings that surprised me in all of our studies was that the more you change, the more you improve at any age, which is really empowering. Now, I predicted incorrectly, as it turns out, that the younger patients who had less severe disease would do better than those who were older, who had more advanced disease, but I was completely wrong. It wasn't how old they were, it wasn't how sick they were. The only thing that mattered was the more you change your diet and lifestyle, the better you get at any age, which is really a great message to be able to give people. And James Cameron executive produced a new film that's coming out in September called Game Changers, which James Wilkes and Joseph did, which basically addresses some of the myths of eating a plant-based diet, that you're a wimp and that you don't get enough protein, which are the most common concerns people have. And so he got all these elite athletes, mixed martial artists and Olympic athletes and triathletes and others, whose performance, became medal winners after they developed after they began eating a plant-based diet, just to show, again, to make it aspirational for people to eat this way. Awesome. And there's a great scene in the film where Aaron Spitz, who's a urologist, has 3 guys they're probably in their late 20s, who are all elite athletes, and he has them eat a meat-based meal, and then at night he measures the frequency and how hard their erections are using this special device, and then gives them a meat-based meal the next night, meat-based to the first day, and then the plant-based meal the second night, and he found that all 3 of them had like 300 to 500% more frequent erections and 10 to 15% harder just from one meal. Now, the same is true of what's going on in your brain or what's going on in your heart, although more people are probably more motivated. In fact, the film crew apparently became vegan after shooting that segment. But again, it's trying to connect the dots between, these are not things that make you like, oh, I have to suffer and be an ascetic. These are things that make life that much more juicy and fun and pleasurable, whether it's eating healthfully, whether it's being in a committed relationship, whether it's practicing meditation. And ultimately, these are things that make us feel empowered and free and healthy. And whatever you do that brings meaning, you'll find it generally works better when you can come from that place. We found in our studies that depression scores were cut by 50%. I mean, that's better than Prozac or any of the antidepressants.
Well, there have been lots of studies regarding dietary interventions with depression and anxiety, and there's only one diet that has been shown to improve depression and anxiety significantly, and it starts to do it in as little as 2 weeks, and it's a plant-based diet. And so plant-based is needed for several reasons. The depression and anxiety is due to inflammation in the brain. And if we get arachidonic acid out of the diet, then the inflammation in the brain goes down. Arachidonic acid is a pro-inflammatory mediator. If you're taking Aleve or anti-inflammatories like that, ibuprofen, you're actually trying to block the arachidonic acid pathway from metabolizing. Well, you don't need to block the metabolic pathway if you don't have arachidonic acid in your diet, and you don't need arachidonic acid in your diet. And so arachidonic acid is present in meat, fish, and eggs. So that's why we go free of those things. And then we also want to go free of what we call oxidized cholesterol. The more cholesterol, the higher the rates of depression and the more treatment resistant it becomes. And so those are a couple of reasons we use the plant-based diet. A third reason is if you're on antioxidants, your depression clears up much better. And so we want a high antioxidant plant-based diet. And then we want a diet higher in omega-3 type of fats, which can help our brain in a number of ways. It's almost acts as a mood stabilizer, prevents the euphoric mania, and it also prevents the depression, and it's also, in addition, a potent anti-inflammatory molecule. So that's the specifics of the diet. Now, there's some might need more folate, depending on our lab work. We do $2,700 worth of lab work. We're looking at genetics and all of those things. And so there might be some specific things that we'll use on top of that to create normal brain chemistry.
I believe that the culture that we live in has created these poles. That are you a keto paleo person, or are you a vegan plant-based person, and you need to identify where you're at. I love not necessarily picking a side. So when it comes to the brain and food, one of the top things that I recommend is fats, good fats. Now you can get fats from plant-based, you can get fats from paleo or anything in between. And the type of fat, of course, is very important as well. But fats are the backbone of our cells. So if you think of our body as about 75 trillion cells, we're cellular beings with spirit inside. And these cells have what we call a double wall around it, or phospholipid membrane. Now the wall is what allows things to get in and out. The wall, phospholipid, means fat. So the walls are made of fat. So it's important to have healthy fats within your diet, no matter what diet you are eating or where you're at, because the backbone of the cells is fat. The same thing is the brain. The vast majority of the brain is actually made of cholesterol. Now, you could easily say, well, does that mean I actually should be eating cholesterol because that's going to feed my brain? Not necessarily, because your liver produces most of the cholesterol that the body needs. It doesn't necessarily come from food intake. So then, in order to have a healthy brain, to make sure that the brain cholesterol, the backbone of the brain, is there, then we're looking at making sure we have a healthy liver. If we're looking at having a healthy liver, then we want to do things to help nourish the liver from a food standpoint. And we're also looking at doing things from a functional medicine standpoint to help improve detoxification of the liver and also to clear out chronic infection.
Another interesting brain boosting food is turmeric. I love turmeric. And there are a tremendous number of studies showing that turmeric root can be very effective in helping to bring down inflammation in the body. It can help to fight cancer. It can help your body to metabolize and transform short-chain omega-3 fatty acids, ALA specifically, into the long-chain fatty acids, DHA and EPA, that are excellent for brain health. And turmeric has been found to contribute to your body's efficiency in making that conversion. So when you're getting ALA from things like flaxseed or chia seed, your body will turn it into the DHA and EPA you need more efficiently. In India, where half the population is vegetarian and has been for a long, long time, rates of Alzheimer's and dementia are very low. They're a fraction of what they are in the United States. And there are two factors that may be primary in this. One is a low to no animal product diet for a lot of the population. Another is that they eat a lot of turmeric. It's the turmeric capital of the world. People are eating it every day. It's their favorite spice. Now it just so happens that that may be contributing to brain health in all kinds of ways.
Wow, I love that. It was a really great piece of information. Certainly the anti-inflammatory components of turmeric are something that we all need today. We certainly have a lot of odds stacked against us when it comes to the toxins that we're exposed to for those of us that live in the Western world with all the things that surround us. So putting those things in our toolkit, I think with what you're saying, they're not only important, but they're essential for good health. You can't just kind of get your iceberg lettuce and tomato and put together a sandwich and feel like it's healthy.
Yeah.
And that's your solution. We really need to have this information. And it's not expensive, which is great. You can go and get turmeric from the grocery store.
Yeah, you can actually get turmeric powder. But here's the thing a lot of people don't realize is that turmeric is not very bioavailable by itself.
Okay.
So in India, it's always consumed with some black pepper in the mix and with some fat. Coconut oil is great, or sometimes they use ghee, but any fat, avocado even. And so what we find from a lot of studies is that fat and or black pepper help your body to make use of it. So if you just eat turmeric, you may not actually get much from it. Wow. There are also some supplements out there that make use of something called micelle liposomal delivery or other mechanisms to increase bioavailability, and those can be beneficial too. But you can get a lot of benefit just by adding some turmeric powder to your food, with a little bit of fat of some kind. Add it to a smoothie, get a little coconut in there in your smoothie, add some turmeric. Some people find it an acquired taste. It's kind of spicy and strong, but it's a taste worth acquiring.
I'm writing a book about this. The book is titled Alzheimer's is Not a Disease, which it isn't. It isn't a disease. And it's just it's the end stage, nothing unexpected about it, nothing unpredicted about it, of a decades-long progression, negative change progression that ultimately results in a catastrophe. But there's nothing unnatural about it. It's not really a disease. And the problem is that when they think about things so primitively. They have no understanding of what could be the genesis of such a problem because the science is so primitive. And as soon as they called it a disease, 12 years ago, they put everybody off on thinking that when you have it, you treat it, as opposed to how you should think about it, and that's to stop the decades-long progression. That's really how you should be dealing with it. You should be stopping it from ever happening in life. But we don't think about it that way in the mainstream of medicine. And that's one thing I sort of like about this group, is they're a little bit more open-minded about thinking about things in those terms. Mm-hmm. And that's what my book is about.
You're saying that, do you believe that Alzheimer's can be prevented?
Oh, absolutely. No question. Or you could say delayed for probably indefinitely in most people. But I also think that when you do that, the changes that you drive in the brain will lead to substantial increases of longevity.
Truly, what we need to do for Alzheimer's and dementia is what we need to be doing for life extension, what we need to be doing if we have cancer, if we have diabetes. So it's a life extension lifestyle is what it truly is. And so a lot of those things are really simple. We need to be fasting for at least 14 hours overnight daily. So figure out when you eat dinner, when you eat breakfast, and 16 hours would be better, but at least a minimum of 14 hours without food. That allows your body to balance out the blood sugars. It allows your bowel to rest, to restore, because it needs downtime too. So fasting, overnight fasting for 48 hours, exercise. Let's talk about diet for a few minutes, because diet is crucial. So we need to eliminate all grains. Number one deal, eliminate all grains, because grains are inflammatory. Inflammation is a basic cause of disease, whether that's neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, autoimmune disease, aging. So all of those are inflammatory processes. So grains are inflammatory. If you're going to do some grains, use some ancient grains. Spelt some of the ancient grains that haven't been genetically modified. That's where you want to go if you're going to use grains at all.
Bernardo Lapello is one of the longest lived guys right now. He's 115, I believe, and he's in Arizona. He's been on plant-based whole food nutrition for all of his life. He wrote a book, Living Beyond 100, and it's quite an inspiration. He exercises, wakes up in the morning, and drinks fresh water, eats a lot of fresh fruit, and he has that positive mental attitude. He rubs some oil on his skin rather than consuming it, and that keeps his skin protected from the sun and things. But I think that we can learn from this. My goal is to be the longest lived individual in history. In 60 years, I'll be 123, and I plan to have sex on my 123rd birthday to prove that you can live a longer, better quality life. And you're right, people don't want to live a long time because their view of someone past 100 is they're decrepit, they're in a wheelchair, they can barely function, they're drooling, And really, if you look at the studies about Alzheimer's, you mentioned that at some point, and senile dementia, it's interesting that in the NUN study, there was a classic study reported in Brain Fitness by Dr. Bob Goldman in his book. And what they identified was the nuns who were on a plant-based whole foods nutrition throughout their entire life. Their brain function was perfect. They never developed Alzheimer's. They didn't develop dementia. In the group of nuns who were eating meat, cheese, eggs, and dairy product, the incidence of Alzheimer's and dementia was statistically similar to the rest of the population. So here's a group away from stress. They didn't really have to worry about a job. Basically under the same conditions, the only difference was their diet. The same as the Trappist monks and Benedictine monks, same thing, plant-based versus animal-based. The plant-based monks, away from stress, lived longer, less disease, little or no cancer, heart disease, brain function, excellent. Even Dr. Alzheimer, if you read the original literature, stated that the Alzheimer's condition, and it was Dr. Alzheimer who stated this, was found in people who ate a lot of animal product. They had high LDL, low density lipoprotein cholesterol. That cholesterol clogged up the arteries to the brain, and when it reduces circulation in the brain, the small capillaries to the brain, that microcirculation, you can't think clearly.
There's some primary things: diet, and we'll cover that extensively in a minute, exercise, and then nutritionals, and you can separate those from your diet if you want, and then supplements and active, aggressive medical treatment. Let's be very clear though, if you go on the internet, Alzheimer's, not preventable, irreversible, and all of that is simply not the truth. Alzheimer's is absolutely preventable. Alzheimer's is reversible up to stage 5. There's 7 stages of Alzheimer's. Even stage 6, we can hold the line and prevent progression. Stage 5, we can roll Alzheimer's back and regain some of that memory. So Alzheimer's is absolutely preventable and is to a significant degree reversible.
That's amazing. Tell us, how can we fix it?
Well, diet is your number one thing. Diet is critical. So we briefly mentioned that when we talked about it being another name as diabetes type 3. So avoiding sugar and sugar spikes. Sugar spikes cause Alzheimer's, sugar spikes cause diabetes, sugar spikes cause cancer. Many, not singularly, but one of the factors. And so what is a sugar spike? A sugar spike is when we eat a certain substance and it spikes the blood sugar more than 20 points. So this is critical in my treatment of Alzheimer's patients and cancer patients and in preventing aging, everything that I do. So I'll actually tell my patients, go to the local pharmacy and get a blood sugar meter. Check your blood sugar, eat the bowl of whatever you're going to eat, quinoa or corn or potatoes or fruit or whatever. Set your timer for 20 minutes and check your blood sugar again. If your blood sugar went up over 20 points, you can't eat that. That's causing a sugar spike. Sugar spikes cause damage everywhere from the brain to the pancreas to our little bitty blood vessels, our capillaries, nerves, sugar feeding cancer cells. Sugar spikes are one of the unhealthiest things that we can do in life.
Now, one of the major things that causes neurodegeneration is why they call it diabetes of the brain, is that all this sugar that we eat, all this high blood sugar, we spike our blood sugar up all the time. What that does is produces massive free radicals. These free radicals, if we don't have enough antioxidants, the free radicals, they will create cascading degeneration of brain cells. So your body makes glutathione and a few other antioxidants. If you're healthy and you're making lots of glutathione, then when your body makes the free radicals, the glutathione will neutralize it. See, that's healthy. But if you make too many free radicals, your body can't make enough glutathione to neutralize it. So now what you have is excess free radicals, and that causes, it actually goes, and these free radicals, they rob the ions from healthy cells. That's called degeneration. Those cells start dying, and in order to stay alive, they go and rob the negative ions out of somebody else, and then they go out and rob. What you get is a cascading effect. The body then starts creating fibrin, inflammation, to put out the fire. They can't put it out, but they can contain it, and that's this chronic, what the term for it is oxidative stress. It just doesn't go away. And your brain just keeps degenerating. Nothing you can do about it unless you understand how to solve the problem. Why did the fire start in the first place? Too many free radicals? Okay, well, cut back on your sugar. Second, restore a normal healthy blood sugar balance. And 2, increase more glutathione. If you cut back on your sugar, your body will make more glutathione.
Let's talk real quick about sugar. Okay, sugar. It's interesting, the average person in the United States consumes almost 100 pounds of sugar a year. That's astronomical. That's massive amounts of calories in the form of sugar. Well, sugar is an essential nutrient, is something our body does need. It doesn't need it in massive quantities, but it does need some of it. When we flood our system with sugar, okay, it's very similar to flooding a car with fuel, okay? Our system will spit and sputter like a car that's flooded, quote unquote, with fuel will spit and sputter. Okay, so things don't operate as well, okay? Another thing that happens with excessive sugar intake is that our red blood cells start to crystallize, okay? Not only do they not carry oxygen and nutrients very well then, but they crystallize with sugar crystals, and they have kind of like barbs on them, or what would I say, similar to prickers on a rose stem, okay, that are protruding from the red blood cell, okay, and as those crystallized red blood cells float around through the system, they tear up the blood vessels, they cut and damage our blood vessels, okay, very damaging. And this is why folks with diabetes have such poor circulation, okay, is their blood vessels have been tore up by these crystallized red blood cells, and they've got scarring in their blood vessels, and so the blood vessels don't expand and contract very well, therefore circulation gets reduced. Well, with the projections right now, we're filming in 2017. The projections are that by 2030, 50% of the U.S. population will have type 2 diabetes. Now, that being the case, type 2 diabetes is when the system has been flooded with sugar for so long, the cells no longer will accept sugar very well, and they do that by way of shutting down the insulin receptor sites, okay? So you got this keyhole where insulin fits into, okay? And what happens is when the cells have been so saturated with sugar, they close down the keyhole, and so the key doesn't fit into it anymore, okay? And you get what we call insulin resistance. So insulin resistance, if that happens in your brain, protein starts getting deposited in the brain, these amyloid proteins that disrupt our recall ability and disrupt our memory, and you end up with a condition very similar to Alzheimer's. There is, they even call, some people call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes instead of type 2 or type 1, they call it type 3 diabetes. And it's insulin resistance of the brain, okay? And that's because the brain cells have been just chock full of sugar for so long, they don't want any more, okay? And they lock the door by shutting down the keyhole, so the key can't fit in the hole anymore. The key being insulin, okay, and so we become insulin resistant, and that's a very bad thing, because the only food source, the only fuel source for our brain is sugar. Okay, so if we don't have enough sugar getting into the brain doesn't work well. Well, if it doesn't work well, think of all the different things, that only affects everything that the brain affects. So if you think of, what doesn't your brain affect? Your brain's your body's control center. And so it affects everything. Okay. So with Alzheimer's, there are the path for correcting Alzheimer's has to include a whole food organic diet. Okay, we have to get away from chemicals and pesticides and herbicides and things that are going to be pro-inflammatory. Okay, and let me just step over 1 minute. We'll come back to that thought here. Inflammation in our body will lead to insulin resistance. Okay, because inflammation in our cells will cause damage of the insulin receptor sites. So that keyhole for the insulin key to fit into, if we have too much inflammation in the cell, it can damage that keyhole. So instead of the keyhole being arranged like this, if the cell becomes oxidized because of too much sugar or because of too much inflammation, the keyhole can get tipped or turned or damaged in a way that the key doesn't fit into it anymore. Okay, so if it's supposed to be like this and the key fits in like this, if the keyhole gets tilted, the key can't fit into there. Okay, if it gets tilted this way, it can't fit in. If it gets tilted like this, the key just doesn't fit in. If the keyhole gets warped, the key doesn't fit in. Okay, all those things happen in the presence of inflammation. Okay, inflammation causes oxidation of those insulin receptor sites, and this is everywhere in the body that happens. So in the course of for correcting Alzheimer's, okay, if we were to remediate Alzheimer's, we have to regulate fuel. Okay, and that would be your food. We have to regulate the amount of fuel coming in. What I do with Alzheimer's patients as far as diet goes is I have them eat, when they eat 2 parts vegetables. Okay, and these are greens, yellows, oranges, green vegetables, red vegetables, yellow vegetables, purple vegetables. Okay, on their plate, 1/2 of their plate has to be vegetables. The other half is half protein and half fruit. So they have 2 parts vegetable at every meal, 1 part protein at every meal, and 1 part fruit at every meal. And this stabilizes their blood sugar. Okay, it brings it down to where it should be. It also maximizes the amount of nutrients, especially the brain protecting nutrients that they're getting from their food.
Now what caused the problem, you got to understand, is the high blood sugar levels. So if I have a cure for a headache, let's say it's a pill, to take this pill, your headache goes away, and I keep hitting my head with a hammer, does it work? No. So I got to get the blood sugar levels down, but there's already damage done. Anybody with dementia and Alzheimer's has damage to their brain cells where they're not absorbing enough sugar. They have insulin resistance in the brain. So you bypass that. The first step is to bypass it. And that's where, they found even 15 years ago, they said lots of coconut oil. I mean, lots of coconut oil in your diet is a remedy for Alzheimer's. Okay, so now you don't have to take lots. You just have to take the extract of coconut oil, which is MCT oil. And MCT has ketones in it. Ketones is when your body is burning fat for energy rather than sugar for energy. When you're burning fat for energy, ketones go into the brain and fuel those brain cells. And see, with all the damage done to the brain through all this sugar and stress, the brain cells just aren't getting fuel and they die. But if you bring ketones along, immediately goes right in and gives energy. There's no resistance to ketones. It's amazing what will happen with just simply getting more ketones into your brain. And that's been shown to prevent Alzheimer's disease. And it's such a simple thing, and there's no drug. You won't hear about that often, but it's very basic.
My husband, Steve, he was an accountant. He worked at home for my practice so that he could take care of our children at home. And when he was about 51 years old, he began having memory issues, making payroll mistakes, having trouble organizing his accounting, and then he began forgetting if he'd been to the bank and the post office, which was very odd. He was only 2 years older than me, and I didn't think I would forget that type of thing. And at first we attributed it to depression, but he kept getting worse. And in 2004, when he was only 54 years old, he was officially diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And he had the early onset form of the disease, which happens in about 2% of people with Alzheimer's and people who are less than 65 years of age. I just happened upon this information about ketones as an alternative fuel for the brain on the internet. A press release about a medical food that was being studied. It wasn't going to be out for another year. It improved the memories of nearly half the people who took it with Alzheimer's disease. And I had to find out what it was. And I learned from their patent application that it was medium-chain triglyceride oil. And I was familiar with that because I'm a neonatologist. We used to add it to the feedings of our premature newborns, a little bit to each feeding, our tiniest ones, because they absorbed it very well and because it helped them grow faster. So I knew right away what MCT oil was. I think if I wasn't a neonatologist, I would not have, nothing further would have happened. I wouldn't have known that I could get it and what it might be able to do. But with Stephen, what happened was I knew that coconut oil was available over the counter, and I learned from the patent application that MCT oil is extracted from coconut oil, and coconut oil is about 60% medium-chain triglycerides. So he was scheduled for 2 screenings for 2 different clinical trials, 2 days in a row, and I learned this information the night before the first screening and didn't really have time to go out and do anything about it. So we had a day before and a day that he started coconut oil. It was very amazing. And the first screening, when we didn't have it available, he scored 2 points below the threshold that he needed to get into the clinical trial, and that was devastating. He was asked to draw a clock. He drew a few little random circles and a few numbers. I think it was 9, 10, 11, 12, just a very random, nothing structured like a clock, and I was told that he was on the verge of severe Alzheimer's. So I thought, what do we have to lose? I'm going to pick up some coconut oil, and we stopped at a health food store on the way home, and when we got home, I looked on the internet for more information to remind myself what are the medium-chain triglycerides. I found the fatty acid composition from a USDA website of coconut oil and learned that it was 60%. So I calculated how much coconut oil I would need to give him to equal 20 grams of medium-chain triglycerides that they were using in the medical food. So the next day, that turned out to be a little over 2 tablespoons of coconut oil. And the next morning, a few hours before he was scheduled for the screening, I put a little over 2 tablespoons of coconut oil in some oatmeal, and he ate that. And several hours later, he improved. We were in a different center than we were the previous day, but he remembered a different town that we were in. He remembered the day of the week. He remembered the season. He knew what floor we were on, and those were things that he could not remember the day before when he took the mini mental status test. And this time he scored 18, which was 2 points over the threshold to get into the clinical trial. So he was literally accepted into a clinical trial because of his response to simply taking coconut oil. And, at first, I wasn't 100% sure, did we just get very lucky or was it really the coconut oil? But we decided to keep it going. And so every morning in the beginning, he would get a little over 2 tablespoons of coconut oil. And then I started cooking with it and got every recipe I could get my hands on, and eventually added MCT oil. And I continued coconut oil because that's what he improved from. Initially, I thought, what if there's something in coconut oil that's not in MCT oil that has something to do with this effect? So we incorporated both into his diet, and we saw steady improvement over about a 9-month to 10-month period, where he went from the day before not even being able to draw a clock, and if we were gardening, for example, he couldn't remember if he was digging a hole or filling it in. He would get confused about the simplest things that he was doing. He had great difficulty finishing a sentence. And over a 9 to 10 month period, he improved so much. Physical symptoms went away, like tremors and a stiff gait. His memory began to improve. The animation came back in his face. People with Alzheimer's often have kind of they call it a dead look. That came back. His sense of humor came back. He had a visual disturbance where he could not read, and he described it. He couldn't describe it until after it went away with coconut oil. He said it was like the words were moving around on a page. The shaking stopped, and then he was able to read again. 9 to 10 months after we started this, he was able to remember what he had read earlier in the day and tell me about it. And one example of that is we were in a doctor's office. I was the one that had the appointment, and he sat in the waiting room. And there were Scientific American and other magazines on the table. And several hours after we left the doctor's office, he said, "You know, I was reading this Scientific American article about Albert Einstein," and he told me details about that. And it was just so profound to me that he had come so far that before he started using coconut oil, he couldn't remember if he was filling in a hole or digging the dirt out of it, and now he could remember what he had read, something that detailed several hours earlier. It was just really an amazing journey to see his recovery and reversal of a lot of his symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. And one of the overwhelming things about it was now I have this information that nobody else knows. The medical food in the press release, they didn't say what it was or how it worked. And here, this is a little case study, you know, a study of one person who responded very quickly to taking medium chain triglycerides. In this case, it was coconut oil in the form of coconut oil. And, you know, this medical food wasn't going to be out for a while, and I thought, this is on the shelf. People need to know about this. They need to know about it now, and there are 5 million people in the United States and 30 million or so people worldwide, you know, that have this problem, and they don't have time. When you have Alzheimer's, you progressively get worse. Normally, there's no turning around, and you know, I felt like people's brain cells were literally dying while I had this information. So it became really an obsession of mine to get the message out and to just let everybody know about it as quickly as possible. And
what would be your message to people out there that are suffering with Alzheimer's?
I would say that to look at nutrition. Look at nutrition as a guide to trying to get better. Exercise can do that. Taking foods like coconut oil and medium chain triglycerides can do that. Reducing the carbohydrate in the diet can do that. So that there are things that can be done that could increase fuel to the brain, which is extraordinarily important.
Well, I think one of the biggest issues that is the modern era of the way that we eat, and especially, you know, in the industrialized worlds where, you know, we're eating 3 meals a day minimum, and then we're grazing in between. And so basically we're in a fed state all the time. So most people are overfed and they're undernourished. And most people, I liken it like this. Most people are eating a beach ball size worth of calories every day. Inside of those calories is a grain of sand worth of micronutrients. All the essential fatty acids, the essential amino acids, all the minerals, trace elements, the vitamins, the plant-based botanicals, the phytonutrients, all of those things is like a grain of sand inside of that beach ball. And we can have obese kids today that have diseases of malnutrition like scurvy and rickets. Clearly not a calorie intake deficit. It's a nutrient intake deficit. And so we're overfed, we're undernourished, so we need to have more nutritional density. How much? It'd be more like a baseball, you know, that's dense and hard and packed with as much nutrition as possible. And it's only this big compared to this beach ball that's this big and has a grain of sand inside of nutrients. So we have to make those decisions to get more nutrients into a lower number of calories. And so that's really critical. I'm really starting to realize more and more the biggest thing that we have control over as humans is what goes in our mouth. It's what goes in our mouth every day. And, you know, it's the things we drink, it's the snacks we eat, it's the meals we eat, the desserts we have. You know, and that one decision to change the things that are going in your mouth can be your biggest poison, or it can be your biggest medicine.
Dr. William Davis, I'm very thrilled to be interviewing you right now. I deeply respect your work and your hard work and diligence. I respect that you've influenced and touched a lot of people, millions, with your work, and it's helped people identify some hidden causes for why they're not feeling how they should feel. Depression and anxiety, what are you seeing as some common underlying factors that are underpinning this epidemic in our world today, especially when it comes to diet and lifestyle? Certainly it's a contributive factor. Obviously there's a meaning and purpose challenge there, but particularly with, you're a medical doctor, you've clearly, I'm sure you've seen patients that are clinically depressed. I'd like to hear what you have to say on what you see as the common causes for the causes for these things, and also for the solutions.
The whole wheat conversation got its start in the 50s and 60s, beginning with psychiatric illness. So there were people who made these observations, that in wartime, when there was a shortage of bread, hospitalization for schizophrenia dropped off dramatically. There was an observation made by a physician who was part of a research team in the highlands of New Guinea in the early 1960s, and there was a highland culture of about 6,000 people, and this physician noticed the signs and symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia, which are very obvious, in one person among 6,000 inhabitants. Well, this research group, this large research group, was trading with these people. Cornbreads, breads, candies for whatever, spears, other things, skins, whatever. And he watched 60 people show up newly with schizophrenia, a 60-fold increase in schizophrenia. So he brought that observation back to the US. He took a job at the VA hospital in Philadelphia, where he somehow persuaded, this is in an age before informed consent, you could do research on people without their knowledge, and he and colleagues were in the psychiatric ward of this VA hospital, about 40 patients, inpatients in a locked ward, so their food, their coming and going, and medications could be controlled, and they took all wheat out of the diet of these schizophrenic inpatients. And they watched their schizophrenia get better, not go away, but improve. They were better socially engaged, they were less paranoid, they had less hearing voices, auditory hallucinations. Over a month, they added wheat back. They watched it come back. They took it away again. They watched them get better. They added it back again. They'd had this on again, off again, which proves cause and effect. There was a very skeptical group at University of Sheffield in the UK, and they said, let's give this a try and prove it to ourselves whether this works. And they did it in their own closed wards. Did the same thing. Remove all wheat, watch them get better. Watch the schizophrenic patients get better. Added it back, watch them get worse. Took it away, they got better. Added it back, they got worse. These data were published. And then after that, there was a series of publications from various psychiatric groups showing the association of wheat consumption. They may have called it gluten, but wheat consumption, the gliadin protein really, with psychiatric illness. Research at the National Institutes of Health in the US drilled down a lot of the effects to the gliadin protein, but specifically gliadin-derived opioid peptides. So that research came from our own NIH, from a biochemistry group, and it showed that grains, the gliadin protein of wheat and related proteins of other grains, yield opiates, and they have opioid effects on humans. So that opened the door to other psychiatric research. It became clear a lot of depression was due. Not all depression, but a lot of depression was either caused or worsened by grain consumption. Some forms of bipolar illness, but specifically the mania, can be triggered by grain consumption. A lot of phobias are triggered by grain consumption. I don't know what percentage, because that formal study hasn't been done, but I've watched a lot of people with agoraphobia, for instance, and other forms of phobias have complete resolution.
That is incredible. That is incredible. I mean, what a finding, and so long ago. It's been, I mean, how much longer does this need to be under our nose for until we wake up and look at this, and for anyone suffering from any level of depression or anxiety or another mental illness, at least rule it out in case it could be a causative factor for them.
Well, it's been clear for many years, actually, to the anthropologists who don't really talk to us about nutrition very much, but they've known for decades, literally, that traditional strains of grains, particularly wheat, have had adverse effects on humans who consumed it. So what happened, if you ask an anthropologist what happened to the first humans who consumed the seeds of grasses, that's wheat, in this case einkorn wheat, that's the ancestral form of wheat that grew wild in the Middle East, what happened to those humans? Well, before the consumption of grains, tooth decay was almost unknown. 1 to 3% of all teeth recovered prior to the consumption of grains showed decay or abscess or loss. When grains were added, 16 to 49% of teeth showed decay or abscess formation and misalignment. Humans shrunk. For a few centuries, men lost on average 5 inches, women lost 3 inches, because grain consumption is not nutritious, it's actually anti-nutritious. There's something called phytates, for instance, that block nutrient absorption in grains. So this notion that you must eat grains for nutrition is complete nonsense. There was a doubling of knee arthritis. There was an explosion in nutritional deficiencies, especially iron deficiency, because you can see that in the bones. It's called porotic hyperostosis. So in other words, consumption of grains, traditional grains, caused a lot of problems. If we now talk about modern grains, we now see that grains have been dramatically changed by geneticists, by agribusiness. Wheat, for instance, now is not the 4.5-foot tall traditional plant we think of. It's an 18-inch tall, what's called the high-yield semi-dwarf strain. It stands about knee-high, it's thick, short, it has very large seeds, a long seed head, and the farmers love it because it increases yield as much as 8-fold per acre compared to some of the traditional strains. And so virtually all modern wheat, not all, but virtually all modern wheat is now the high-yield semi-dwarf strain of wheat. And that's very, very different. There's a whole catalog of changes introduced. Just the fact that it's so different looking, of course, suggests it's genetically different. But for instance, modern wheat has been enriched in wheat germ agglutinin. It's a protein that's indigestible to humans, and it's very toxic to the gastrointestinal tract. The reason why it's been enriched, that is, the content increased, is because it's a very effective pest-resistant protein. It keeps molds and bugs from eating the wheat plant. So farmers, geneticists selected strains with higher wheat germ agglutinin content, but it made wheat more toxic. They chose strains that are richer in phytates, because phytates likewise are pest resistant. Now grains are much more rich in phytates, but phytates bind all calcium, magnesium, iron, and zinc, almost all in your intestinal tract. And so that's why we have a lot of iron deficiency anemia, zinc deficiency, magnesium deficiency, and an inability to absorb calcium because of grain consumption. The gliadin protein, people say gluten, but a better way of thinking about grains is gliadin is a component of gluten, but gliadin's been changed dramatically, and it amplified its opioid effects. That is, gliadin can't be digested by humans fully. It's broken down to pieces. Those pieces bind to the human brain, the opiate receptors, and has peculiar effects. In people with schizophrenia, it causes auditory hallucination, hearing voices. It causes paranoia. In kids with autistic spectrum disorder, it causes behavioral outbursts, and it reduces attention span. People with a tendency towards depression, it triggers depression. And people with bipolar illness, it can trigger the mania. In people with suicidal tendencies, it triggers suicidal thoughts. In people with binge eating disorder or bulimia, it triggers food obsessions, 24-hour-a-day food obsessions.
This is certainly something that people need to be concerned about. Is there any way, I'm not advocating this, but is there any way for people to get non-genetically modified or non-genetically altered wheat? Or does it not exist? Is it in other countries? Is there any way to get it in America? I'm not advocating it, but tell me.
To my dismay, you can indeed obtain older strains of wheat, like red fife, which was very popular in the 19th century, or emmer, which is the wheat of the Bible, or einkorn, which is the ancestral form of wheat, or spelt, also an old strain. There are many, many old strains, and they're kind of making a small comeback. And they are less harmful, but at no point does it become harmless. So the analogy I often draw is if I told you my low-tar cigarettes cause a little less lung cancer and heart disease than full-tar cigarettes, does that make low-tar cigarettes healthy? Same kind of comparison here. Grains that are traditional are less harmful than modern high-yield semi-dwarf wheat, but never are they completely harmless. There's still plenty of diabetes with the older strains. There's still plenty of autoimmune diseases and still plenty of other health problems with consumption of wheat. And by the way, this all boils down to the fact that all grains are literally seeds of grasses. They're seeds of grasses. And humans simply do not have the enzymes, the digestive apparatus to break down any component of grass. That's why in times of war, people are starving, they eat grass or bark or things like that, and they get very sick because we can't consume grass. If you were to eat grass, and if it stays down, you don't throw it up, it passes through you intact. So humans are incapable of digesting the blades, the leaves, the stalk, the stems, the roots, the husks, and the seeds. And that explains why a lot of the proteins are toxic, because they're either indigestible or only partially digestible. Wheat germ agglutinin, for instance, is completely impervious to human digestion. It goes through intact, but in its course from mouth to toilet, it has all kinds of toxic effects on the gastrointestinal tract. The gliadin protein, that component of gluten, is partially digestible, but broken down to small pieces or peptides, 4 or 5 amino acids long. Those are the things that act as opioids or opiates on the human brain. But a lot of the toxicity of wheat and grains makes sense if we all understand that these are all seeds of grasses, and humans just don't have the apparatus for consuming grasses. If we look at a ruminant, for instance, a goat or a cow or a horse, you see they have very specific adaptations. They have a dental pad on the top of their mouth to grasp grass. They have continually growing teeth. They grow entire lives because grasses abrade or erode teeth. They have a 4-compartment stomach that has unique microorganisms that break down the cellulose of grass. They have a grinding function in their stomach. They have a spiral colon, extra long spiral colon to accommodate the lengthier digestive process and specific microbes to break down grasses. And of course, we have none of that. We are not equipped to consume the seeds of grasses, yet we've been told they should comprise 70% of all human calories.
So I wrote a book called The Spectrum that was based on this finding that said, look, you know, if you go on a diet, chances are you're going to go off a diet, because diets are all about what you can't have and what you must do, and even more than being healthy, most people want to feel free and in control. And as soon as I tell somebody, eat this and don't eat that, they immediately want to do just the opposite. You know, it's just human nature. And when I lecture sometimes, I say it goes back to the first dietary intervention when God said don't eat the apple, and that didn't go so well, and that was God talking, so we're not going to do better than that. So to say, look, so if you go on a diet, then you're going to go off it, because people don't like to feel controlled and so on. And then you have all those shame and guilt and anger and humiliation, all those toxic emotions that really are bad for you. So to say, look, food is just food, but some foods are healthier than others. So I categorize foods in the book from group 1, the most helpful, which are basically the whole foods plant-based diet, to group 5, which are the least helpful, which are your usual suspects, you know, cheeseburgers and donuts and things like that, and groups 2 through 4 in the middle. And I say what matters most is your overall way of eating and living. So if you indulge yourself one day, it doesn't mean you cheated or you're bad. You know, the whole language of behavioral medicine has this, behavioral change has this kind of shaming, guilt, you know, toxic quality, you know, like wagging your finger, which people hate. If you indulge yourself one day, it doesn't mean you cheated or you failed. Just eat healthier the next. You don't have time to meditate for an hour, do it for a minute. You don't have time to exercise one day, do a little more the next day. You know, you don't have time to be with your friends and family one day, spend a little more time with them the next day. Then you can't fail. It's a much more compassionate approach, because there's no diet to get on, there's no diet to get off. And the other thing that often brings meaning to people when they change their diet is to realize that it's not just helping you, that what's good for you is good for the planet. You know, what's personally sustainable is globally sustainable. You know, more global warming is caused by eating livestock than all forms of transportation combined. It's one of the reasons why I used to get into debates in a very friendly way with Al Gore and say, you know, it's great to drive small cars and have fluorescent light bulbs, but you know, you should be eating a plant-based diet. And, you know, years ago he became a vegan, to his great credit, not because of me, because he wanted to do the right thing. And, you know, even though he's a cattle rancher, I think it's a great example for everyone. And so when people realize, and it takes 10 to 14 times more resources to make a pound of meat-based protein than plant-based protein. So we have enough food in the world to feed the hungry, you know, worldwide. No one need go hungry if everyone were eating a plant-based diet. It's completely preventable. It's not like we need to learn something new. We just need to put that into practice. So maybe you're not ready, if you're watching this, to be a vegan or a vegetarian or whatever. Maybe have one meal a day. You know, I'm choosing to have a meatless Monday because I want to. It's going to help me. It's going to help the planet. It's going to help feed the hungry. That's a good choice. You know, start slowly, and then as you begin to do it for others, it brings meaning, which makes it sustainable. And because these biological mechanisms are so dynamic, you're going to feel so much better when you have that one meal a day that's plant-based. You'll say, well, maybe I'll have 2 meals, you know, and then it kind of comes out of your own experience, and that ultimately is what makes it sustainable.
All right, now let's have a look at your nutritional protocols, your lifestyle. Yeah. Like, if you could help the person that's watching, whatever background they're from, whatever they're doing right now, wherever that they are in the world, they're suffering from depression or anxiety or something of that nature, and they're looking at, well, how do I get better? The drugs don't work. So what did you do? How can I do that? Can you take me through each of the steps? Because you're very good at this. You've been through the program a bunch. You've done it yourself. So take me through each of the steps so I could just see what are all the major things that I need to do and how my day would look, perhaps the order in which I need to do these things and the duration and so forth. So lead me.
Okay. Well, physically, what we want to do is get back to a place where our thoughts are going to be better. That's what we do when we build our body back up. So nutritionally, I make sure that I stick to a plant-based diet. You know, that's all I eat now. And I make sure that I get the specific nutrients that are very important for mental health. You know, I get my omega-3s, I get tryptophan, I get my vitamin B6 and calcium, all those things that I know are important for the formation of the right neurotransmitters that are going to keep me happy, so to speak. So that's where I start, and that's right with breakfast. The early part of my day is where I pack kind of my anti-depression lifestyle. You know, I get up in the morning, I pray right away, and then I drink 20 ounces of water, and then I go out and I exercise for an hour, and then I come back, and then I eat my nice complex carbohydrate breakfast, which is usually like oatmeal with a couple of fruits, maybe strawberries and bananas, or depending on what time of year, it might be some other nice fruit. I'll put some pumpkin seeds on there that are rich in tryptophan, maybe some soy milk, and sprinkle a little flax on there. And then maybe I might include a nice smoothie that has some tofu thrown into it, maybe some flaxseed in there also, frozen fruit, and make a nice big nutrient-packed smoothie.
So give me a breakfast, lunch, and dinner for like a great plant-based day.
Okay. Plant-based fruit and vegetables. Is that mostly what we're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, grains if you think.
Grains, quinoa, nuts, things like that. We use quinoa as like oatmeal.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
it's better than oatmeal, right?
It's way better than oatmeal. And we get the black quinoa, and black quinoa has a lot of the same antioxidants in it that blueberries and blackberries have. Okay, and it's right there, ready and available. And then same with the red quinoa. Red quinoa has all kinds of things that benefit the heart. They're very, very helpful. So it's not just the white quinoa that is real, very widely used. We use all three. We get different kinds. So starting the day with, maybe a quinoa oatmeal with berries and walnuts. Okay, then having in the mid-morning maybe a grapefruit. Okay, for lunch, salad with avocados, spinach, avocados, walnuts, or I'm sorry, almonds, and maybe some cranberries and some apples in there or something like that, you know. And you want your oils. Okay, here's your chance. Get your avocados there, get your dressing with your olive oil and maybe some, vinaigrette or something like that, you know. At night, split pea soup with let's say carrots and parsley in the soup, onions would be very good in that meal. And then before, a lot of times going to bed, have maybe some grapes or a pear or something like that. It's a little something sweet. A lot of people instead of ice cream.
Now, give me day 2, because I know you like to vary. So, what would day 2 look like if that was day 1?
Day 2, we might go more with like root vegetables. Mm-hmm. Maybe start off with maybe we do oatmeal for the next day.
So you're not against oatmeal?
No. There are, if it's organic.
Yeah.
If it's not organic, be prepared. Mm-hmm. Because if it's not organic, it'll have 95% more pesticides and herbicides in it than organic oatmeal.
Great. I'll throw in day 3 here for breakfast, chia seed pudding. What do you think?
There we go. That's where I was going. Yep. Chia seed pudding. And that's one that we, at the Newsom house, that could, if we don't make enough, it could cause problems.
How do you sweeten it?
Normally we just use coconut milk, and then we'll put berries in it or something like that.
And
normally
are you okay with stevia?
We can use stevia, yes, absolutely.
Is it true that stevia is not a sugar, essentially?
Yes, it's not a sugar.
Does it stimulate the brain to say this is sugar?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Yeah, there's nothing conclusive on that. So that's interesting that you haven't seen that experience. So somebody that's because I'm a sweet tooth, so I'm just trying to work out whether it's, so I don't, have refined sugars as much as,
Stevia is, actually has some very powerful effects like metformin, which is a type 2 diabetic medication, okay? Has some effects where it enhances your insulin sensitivity, and no sugar would have that effect. It's in that particular compound is pretty interesting. It's also a pretty good antibiotic, antimicrobial.
Interesting. So it can kill some bacteria, bad
bacteria and parasites.
So the chia seed, people could use almond milk or macadamia or
coconut, hemp milk. Yes, exactly. Any of those works really well. But and you just soak it overnight.
Yeah.
And the chia seeds swell up. It's a good meal.
What's so good about it?
Well, you get your essential fatty acids. You have all kinds of vitamins and minerals in chia seeds. Chia seeds are packed with nutrition. Very, very nutritious. Interesting thing with seeds and nuts that's extremely important is whatever plant that seed or nut comes from will grow an entire new plant. Okay, so all the information, all the genetic information to grow that new plant is in that little seed. Okay, so it's, there's research that's being done, has been done for years, on the efficacy of seeds in providing the nutrients necessary to heal our DNA. And they're so packed with nutrients. The one thing that most seeds need to have done before you consume them, though, is that you soak them. Yeah, we have in my book, we have a list of like cashews. Cashews you normally soak for maybe 2 hours, whereas almonds you need to soak them for about 8 hours. And back and forth. soak all of the, all nuts and seeds the same amount of time. Each one has a kind of a break point. Because a lot of times the seed itself will get waterlogged and start to just turn into mush, and that's not what you want the crunchy, good tasting seeds and nuts and whatnot. But we do have that in my book, Detox for Life. We have that listed out so you can go in and we actually have it in a kind of a cartoon form. It's kind of cool.
Okay, so now we got to breakfast, so lunch and dinner just for day 2. So just what
lunch
would
and
that
dinner
look like?
probably we do a beet quinoa salad. That's awesome. And we normally will pickle the beets prior to making the salad. So that would be for lunch. And then in the evening, maybe a nut butter with apples or hummus and carrots or something along those lines in the evening. And then the next day we do the chia seed pudding and some strawberries, some blueberries, maybe some blackberries in there, and that for breakfast. Maybe some celery, peanut butter or something like that for a snack later on. Salad for lunch. Later in the day, maybe another one of the we do a squash soup that's phenomenal. And have soup and maybe some probably a kale salad or maybe some steamed broccoli or Brussels sprouts or something like that.
Great.
With that. So so if you think about it, look at see the variety. The variety we're eating. We're not eating the same thing over and over and over. Okay, it's a very wide variety of fruits and vegetables and things that you're eating. We actually have in our book. We actually have 50 of these recipes laid out in our book, so it makes it simple.
I had a purpose to keep going forward now, and then from there I left the program. It's the first time I felt peace, where nothing's going on. Like, I could say before I hated my parents, but then they came back, and I was so happy to see them, and it was no euphoria. It was just joy, just peace and joy.
What did that mean to your parents?
And when I saw them after the program ended, they were like, this is like my son. Like, this is the son I knew when he was growing up. That kid that was happy, that knew God, that wanted something more. And they were like, my dad, I don't know why he says this, but he did say it, so I can say it. He's like, you've given me my son back.
Did you enjoy this episode? Are you feeling hope? Are you seeing that it's possible? It's possible for you, and it's something that is a clear pathway that if you follow it, you will get results. You will see your life transform. This is cause and effect. The problems that we're facing are due to actual things that we're going through. It's not in our heads. It's not some genetic thing that we're predestined to that we'll never be able to turn around. We have the power. We have the tools. Isn't that liberating? Isn't it amazing? If you can believe that one thing, the world is your oyster, you'll be unstoppable. You'll see what's possible. You'll see the promises that are in store for you. For me, I believe that God has just given us so much in life, and I feel that we are really given the keys from God through these amazing experts that have given their life to studying the natural aspects of medicine and the root causes for the problems that we're experiencing today. And through that key, we can unlock the health that we need to have the life that we long to have with our family, to take care of our spouse, our children, our grandchildren, our friends, our extended family members, to be clear and present with them, to be able to give our lives to mission, to services that are meaningful to us. You need your mind to do that, and I'm here to help you take those steps that you need to have a clear, vivacious mind that is happy and on fire in a good way. It's firing properly, having the spark of life within it because it's fueled with the right things and the toxic triggers that were harming it are uprooted. That's what we're doing in this next chapter. When you take action today and support our mission, you'll be supporting our cause so we can continue getting this message into the world, and you'll be supporting yourself. You'll be having a tool that's in your home library. You can watch, rewatch, send it to your family and friends, get them to check it out. You'll get a free buddy pass, so you'll be able to get an extended pass there so your friend can log in and watch themselves, or you'll get a second printed set of the major portion of the series, so that way you're able to share that precious tool with your loved ones with that double set that you'll be given. These are some of the amazing tools. You'll be able to ask your questions live on our live question and answer calls so you can get help as you go through the protocol for depression, anxiety, and neurodegenerative diseases. We're going to be diving deep in this 6-module course, and each week you'll be live on our calls, and you can look at the schedule that we have. Just click the link below and you can see we have a limited time offer. Please don't miss out on that. We're really giving away this really special discount because we want to reward people for taking action on their health, and we want to make it possible for everyone. And when you take action, you're supporting us to keep going, keep spreading this message of love, of healing, of truth into the world to help save and change lives forever. And you are a part of that. When you take action, you're actually helping other people. And I'm not kidding you, just in the same way you received this, we were able to give this to you for free. Many, many more people. Hundreds of thousands, even millions of people that have not yet seen this. And maybe one day we'll even reach billions of people. We'll see lives changed. We'll see people that have given up hope. We'll see all the people that would have committed suicide, but because they applied this knowledge and truth that they've learned in this series, their lives were changed forever. And it's because of people like you that choose to support this, choose to get behind people that are out there, whether it's me, whether it's somebody else, getting behind people that are doing good work, that makes sense, that helps to heal. So get behind people that you trust and you like their mission, because that's the only way we're going to be able to change this world. If you believe in what my wife and I are doing, help us continue. Help us continue to get this message to other people that need it desperately. Help us to help heal the heart and mind of a suffering world by giving tools that help us be our best selves, and let us shine our light at the beauty of who you are, the beauty of who this world is made up of. Wonderful, creative, intelligent, loving individuals that are so often impeded by so many struggles that we don't understand. And it leads us to be often our worst selves. And it's got to stop. The judgment's got to stop. The judgment that we have over ourselves, the judgment we have over others, it's got to stop, and we've got to heal. Let's commit our lives to healing. Be a part of that mission. Help us to get this mission, to heal more lives. Take action on your own healing journey. Be your best self. Don't sell yourself short. Never sell yourself short in life. Be your very best self. Protect your heart, protect your mind. And the Bible has an incredible verse on this. It says, protect and guard the heart. Guard the heart, for out of it spring all the issues of life. Now, the heart is really deeply connected to the gut and the mind. And when you speak about, I give you my heart, it's actually talking about giving the deepest part of ourselves. And all of our thinking comes from our gut function and from our brain function. So protect, guard your heart, guard your body, guard your brain, your gut, by doing the right things for your health. And take action. I appreciate you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Click the link below to learn more about what we're doing to help support you, and I'll see you really soon.